What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, it appears over the weekend, talk around a Nintendo Direct for this week has absolutely exploded online. There's hints, teases, and even some reports out there. We're going to go over all of that here today and maybe what we can expect for this week. Also, we are going to be talking about Square Enix responding to some pretty serious Final Fantasy XVI leaks that are getting out there. And we'll also be talking about a game that Nintendo has coming out in just a couple of weeks. We don't really know anything about it until now, after we got a look at a retail box. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure to hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're gonna start today with Final Fantasy XVI, specifically though, the day one patch that the development team had talked about the game just not needing, and they were gonna try to deliver it completely without that. Well, seems plans have changed a bit. This posted up over on Twitter, and a lot of this was shared during a live stream that was going on for Final Fantasy XVI. Dream posted this up on Twitter, saying that the 16 team apologizes as they're going to deliver a pre-release update to fix issues they found on the way to release for progression issues, crash issues, optimized performance, which is kind of a big thing right now after that demo, and then minor text errors. Maybe about 300 megabytes, so it's not going to be some massive, hey, here you install the game, then you have to download a 10 gigabyte patch. This is legitimately stuff that they probably were trying to clean up, but they kind of ran out of time and had to ship a product. Eventually you have to do that, right? So in this case, they also mentioned some feedback they were getting for the demo, which when you release a demo to millions of people, you're going to hear about things that could be better. And in this case, it sounds like they will continue to work to optimize the game further in that performance mode. So we should see a day one patch here, and then most likely a couple more following up post-release. Also, we're just over a week after Xbox had what was, I think, a pretty good showcase, but there were a few things absent, such as the Gears franchise and Halo, which, I mean, back in the day, those were some of the biggest franchises they had available to show off at an E3 or something like that. Well, Phil Spencer was asked about that absence for Halo, and you can see this posted up over on The Guardian, where he says, "I wouldn't say Halo is of lesser importance, but we have over 20 studios now. I'll go back to the years where I had basically 4 games: Fable, Forza, Halo, Gears, the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. We have a lot more games now." He does go on to talk about some of the stuff at 343, where he says, "We've been pretty public about the leadership change at 343. You can kind of see that in some of the social things the team have been doing around seasons, but I don't want to force them to talk about their long-term vision until they're ready." I think you'll see some pretty cool things coming, and that's kind of what I figured was going to happen with Halo Infinite, or just the Halo franchise in general. Kind of go on the back burner a bit, go back in the oven, and allow 343 to kind of regroup and figure out where they're going to go from here with the new leadership there at 343. So it's probably going to be a while before we see Halo featured in a prominent role at an Xbox showcase, but I'm hoping that day can come again and they can, well, get that franchise back on track. Oh, and if you were a fan of Callisto Protocol, of course, that coming out at the end of 2022, and you wanted to see a bit more from it, specifically from the story after the ending, it does look like that downloadable content will be releasing here in a couple of weeks. This posted up over on their Twitter account, where they say, "Prepare for final transmission, the heart-pounding final chapter of Callisto Protocol." Now, what's interesting about this is it's going to release 48 hours early, or just on its release day on PlayStation, and then it'll come out to other platforms on June 29th. So 2 days later, 48-hour timed exclusivity for PlayStation. All right, then, I guess, sure. But the way the game ended, it did kind of feel like it was either going to be a full-on sequel afterwards or, well, some DLC that I guess will just give some sort of resolution or a bit more of a resolution and closure to what happened in the game. So I've kind of moved on from Callisto Protocol, but I guess I could eventually go back to experience the DLC that they release here and find out what else happens in the story after that ending. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with an apparent Nintendo Direct that could be happening any day now. We had talked about this last week, how there were rumors and kind of circulating out there about this happening, but it seems like all of a sudden, a lot of people are talking about a Direct and information that they're gathering, and now people are just trying to figure out what kind of event Nintendo is going to be holding in a couple of days. But let's take a look here. This is from Nate over on Twitter, who keeps giving these really weird percentages, right? Anywhere from a 6.2 to a 6.23 chance of a new Nate the Hate episode airing. And I was kind of playing around with him because, well, Nate's been hinting at this direct, even though he says he's not for a while now, even saying, oh, June's a good time for a direct. Yeah, at first, or at least when we were going into the E3, not E3 season, I was kind of thinking Nintendo would maybe bypass it completely, do some Twitter drops, and then show up in the fall with the full-on general direct to set up next year. I've kind of changed my mind. I think we're looking at some sort of Nintendo event happening in the next couple of days. Could be announced today, but I'm kind of thinking they're going to announce it tomorrow for, we'll say, Wednesday. And to go a bit further, we have Universal Nintendo here. It says, according to information obtained by the Nintendo Universe from anonymous and reliable sources, the company should hold its traditional news presentation through a Nintendo Direct next week, the week up until June 23rd, so this week, basically. And most people would point to Wednesday because it's typically when we'll see directs happen, but really it could be a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We expect at this point to be something that they would announce ahead of time, but it could be a Nintendo Direct Mini that they just release onto YouTube, and that's it. It's 10 minutes. Here are some games coming up. Here are a few things from our third parties, like that Persona 3 Reload that doesn't have the Switch logo on it yet, and we'll see you guys in the fall. However, this has not stopped kind of the hype train from leaving the station around a big general direct. I've even seen it gone as far as people talking about them revealing brand new hardware, I guess the next generation system this weekend. I would pump the brakes on that one, but of course, now you're seeing all of those lists pop up on social media, like this one, for example, that was just kind of replied to. It's the Nintendo Direct entire list. I think Oscar posted this one up, and I'll admit, this is pretty good. I mean, if you take away the spelling errors and the basic wish list that you get when it comes to this, hey, they dropped even the trademark symbol in there for these games. Yeah, whenever you see these lists, I mean, do people really think that there's a list like this floating around within Nintendo that just can make its way out on the social media? I mean, at least make it look like you ran through a conference room while you're being chased by security, snapping pictures with your phone. So basically, we're looking at Nintendo most likely having an event this week, and it could range from an Indie World presentation, a Direct Mini, a partner showcase, a general direct, or it could be a Pikmin Direct, which I'm sure that would go over well online, but I mean, we'll see what we have, I guess, coming up soon. One way or the other, we're going to find out, right? And if we get to Wednesday and nothing's happened, most likely we can kind of call it on the direct stuff, at least for this week, because based on what I've seen on the internet, every week there's a chance, right? So I guess we'll see here soon. Next up, let's talk about Everybody 1-2 Switch. This is a game that Nintendo announced a month before it's set to release on June 30th. And they haven't shown gameplay or anything. We have one screenshot of what I assume to be in the game of live actresses kind of showing off the mini game you're going to be participating in. We have some information, the fact that you can use cell phones, and obviously it's based on what we had with 1-2 Switch to launch the platform, showing off what the Joy-Con and all of this can do. But now it appears that box art has started to circulate after it popped up online, and it seems to give us our best look at the game. I mean, seriously, we're 2 weeks out from this title releasing, and this shot here that you can see, the back of the box, is what we assume to be the best look at it. I say assume because someone could clearly have made this. There have been a lot of wasted time and effort considering this is Everybody 1-2 Switch. I think this game is going to come and go pretty quickly. But there are a few little interesting tidbits here. One, we do get the name for the horse. It's MC Horus. So they even say hey. They spelled hey. Well, they spelled it that. Okay. I'll take the reins and be your host. And interestingly enough, up to 8 people can use the Joy-Con, which means that the Switch Lite is not compatible with this game. But on the right side, they mention up to 100 players. I'm saying 100 players using your cell phone. And I assume that's online play. That would be very interesting if you could actually get 100 people together to play this game all in one room. It also appears that we have screenshots for every single minigame, as there are 16 of them, which kind of reflects the $30 price point on that. But it's a very strange thing to see right now with Nintendo having no actual screenshots or footage of the game being played out there, even on their store, where they are asking for pre-orders, but a box art just kind of floats around out there online, and that's our best look at the game. I assume Nintendo is going to showcase this title maybe at the Direct. Maybe they close with Everybody 1-2 Switch, and we get the big reveal of the 16 minigames and gameplay. That'd be something to see online, how everyone reacts to that one. Metroid Prime 4, no. We got everybody want to Switch. Next up, let's talk about Square Enix and their response to all of the leaks around Final Fantasy XVI. Talked about this on Friday, how it appeared a couple of copies had leaked out there from a warehouse, it seemed. Since then, I have seen multiple unboxings take place, so yeah, there are a couple of different copies out there, and screenshots, plot details, footage of the game being played, it's all getting out there. And in fact, I've seen some just appear in Twitter threads about the game. Like, people are just trying to ruin the game for people who are looking forward to it right now. But Square did take to Twitter, which we can see this posted up over on the Final Fantasy account, saying, "We're aware that a small number of physical copies of Final Fantasy XVI are being circulated. We are in the process of a thorough investigation into illegitimate acquisitions and are acting to limit this ahead of the official launch of the game on June 22nd. For those who receive a copy ahead of launch, we kindly ask that you do not share any aspect of the game, including screenshots, videos, and live streams, until after Final Fantasy XVI has officially launched." They go on to say that if they have to, they will start pulling these images and videos and streams down that are published ahead of launch day through way of DMCA copyright strikes. And that part's not too surprising. We see companies do that all the time if a game leaks out and people are just sharing screenshots, video details, or live stream. Half the time you'll see a live stream going and then it just gets ripped down midway through, and it's like, oh, well, Nintendo or Sony or whoever have put a copyright strike on this stream, and that's why it's gone. So Square, they'll probably go scorched earth if they have to with any of this stuff popping up. But we are close, at least, to this game coming out. We have so much information around. I mean, 90 or so gigabytes for the file size. We know quite a bit, really, how the game starts, as we've played about an hour and a half of it. The tone, the visual style, all these different things. It's right there. It's just a few more days. But also, it turns out Wednesday is when the embargo will lift for reviews. So it's going to be an interesting time when that happens, because that's the big thing now, where people are trying to predict what the Metacritic score is going to be for this one. And I'm kind of thinking it's going to break the 90s, maybe like a 90 or a 91. And for Final Fantasy coming off of 15, that's a pretty big improvement. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about a game heading to Nintendo Switch Online that was announced at the end of last week. This is for the expansion pack with the Game Boy Advance library. We just had a bunch of Game Boy games going to the service, and now Nintendo's following that up with another Game Boy Advance game. This one is pretty good, and we can see the trailer that they released, which is always the really fun part. They go back and they make trailers, that being Nintendo, for some of these older classic titles, and you can see it. This is Fire Emblem, or as Nintendo points out, also known as Fire Emblem, The Blazing Blade. It's available for expansion pack members on June 23rd, and this is a very good Fire Emblem game, but I'll admit it's one that a lot of people probably missed, and if you go out looking for it now and you want it maybe physically and all of this, it's still pretty expensive, considering it's a Game Boy Advance game. Now, I know people emulate and do all these things, but it is fun to see it get this official release, especially to an audience as large as the Switch install base currently, and obviously through Nintendo Switch Online will just kind of be added in. And we've seen Fire Emblem just get larger and larger since it was really introduced to us in Super Smash Bros. Melee is where a lot of people realized that Fire Emblem existed in the first place, even though it had been around for a while, before Smash Brothers, really. So looking at this, seeing the popularity of Fire Emblem, it just seems like we're setting ourselves up for another Fire Emblem game to maybe get introduced here sometime soon. So hey, otherwise though, check it out later on this week. Fire Emblem from the Game Boy Advance, absolute classic, definitely worth a play even now. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're gonna take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, do you pre-order your games? 25% say yes, I pre-order a game to make sure I have it ready day one. 22% say yes, but only for collector's edition I want. And then 54% say no, I wait to see how the game turns out day one before buying. I feel like back in the day, especially during the Xbox 360 PS3 era, like midway through, I feel like people were pre-ordering all the time, and maybe that's because we hadn't made that big push to the digital storefront yet, whereas now it's pretty easy to just grab a game with a couple of button presses, and with how internet speeds are currently, some people are downloading these games in minutes, right? But back then, you had to pre-order it to get it physically because it would legitimately just sell out. So at this time, it seems like it's not really necessary to pre-order unless you feel like it's going to take days for your internet speed to catch up and download a 100 GB file, or you want that collector's edition. We're seeing so many games come out in very poor states. It's harder and harder to justify that pre-order ahead of time. Although I will say, recently, at least for me, with pre-orders, physical copies of games really don't see that much of a run in terms of quantity as it used to. There are many times where I'd go out to the store to pick up a game that just came out, and Walmart doesn't have it, Target didn't get it in, and GameStop got like 3 copies and they're all spoken for. So maybe pre-orders will come back around for physical copies since we're getting close to digital completely overtaking it. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Zelane saying, even if Nintendo releases a successor to the Switch by late 2024, it is unlikely that Nintendo or third-party developers will immediately drop support for the Switch. If games like Persona 3 or ReFantasia are planned for the next Nintendo system, it is probable they will also be released on the Switch. With over 125 million units of the Switch in circulation, the platform will continue to receive game releases for a considerable amount of time, even after the launch of its successor. Yeah, it's one of the reasons I think Nintendo will legitimately get 10, maybe even 11 years out of that generation with the Switch. It'll just continue to run alongside of their next system, the successor to the Switch. Kind of thinking of like the PS2, that was still getting games consistently well into the PlayStation 3 generation. So that scenario could even play into the idea of the Switch eventually passing the PS2 and the DS if it is a very prolonged cross-gen period, and that Switch Lite, for example, is dropped to $150, or even the base Switch falls in price with different cuts. It might make sense for families with a bunch of kids to just buy up a couple of those and be fine with the library of games that are there or that are still coming. So yeah, I think the Switch still has several years in front of it, believe it or not. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Where's the Nintendo Direct talk and hype that's circulating and building up online? If there is a Direct, what game do you want to see there? And then also, what about Final Fantasy XVI? Of course, the leaks popping up online, but what kind of Metacritic score do you think it's going to end up with? And then Fire Emblem, heading into the Game Boy Advance NSO app. Are you going to check it out? And will this be your first time doing so? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.